So Israel is leading the world in COVID vaccinations, and they are one of the least damaged OECD economies in the world, behind only Norway and Ireland, which means that they've done pretty well, all things considered. Now, it's important to look at the Israeli example, not only so we can compare apples to apples when we're talking about the differences between Canada's successes or failures and Israel's successes or failures, but so we can understand what lessons there might be that we can adopt here to make our vaccine rollout much, much smoother and ensure that we get back to normal as soon as possible. So a couple things to keep in mind first about the country of Israel. Number one, it is a very small country. It's about the size of New Jersey. So that in and of itself would mean that it is much easier to ship the vaccine around compared to, for example, a flight from, Toronto to anywhere else, Toronto to Quebec, BC to Quebec, wherever the vaccine is going to be coming in. We have to go maybe hundreds, thousands of kilometers compared to Israel when it's maybe only hundreds at most, and that's in the low hundreds. Additionally, Israel is very densely populated in that the population is very concentrated in a number of areas. That would be probably around Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. There's some cities in the north, but other than that, it's pretty sparsely populated, mostly in the middle of the country, which again makes it much easier to deliver that vaccine. Additionally, because Israel has faced so many military threats in the recent history of the modern state since its founding in 1948, practically everyone is a reservist. And so the government is going to have contact information for almost all these people. They're going to have a way to reach out to these people. These people might be trained in first aid or how to administer vaccines. And so a lot of people have volunteered to help with the rollout, and that has definitely assisted them in terms of manpower and just ability to administer the vaccine to as many people as possible. Additionally, Israel is a biotech powerhouse. Now, a lot of people refer to Israel as the startup nation, and most people tend to think of sort of the traditional technology kind of companies, maybe something to do with the internet or some high-tech military equipment. But it is also a biotech powerhouse. If you compare, for example, Canada to Israel, Israel has, according to one study that I found, about 550 biotech firms, where Canada, for a much larger country, much larger population, has about 800. There's a company, for example, called Teva, which you may have heard of. It is very popular in Canada. A lot of our generic drugs are made through Teva, and that is actually an Israeli company. The name means nature, which, interesting side note, actually, the word nature does not appear in the Hebrew Bible even once. But, for example, companies like that, they are operating in Israel and around the world, and so Israel has a very, very large biotech sector, which has definitely given it a lot of pull when talking to companies like Pfizer, which, again, on the next point, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been on the phone with the CEO of Pfizer on a very regular basis, compared to Justin Trudeau, which has not, I think until today, been on the phone, and this filming is on Thursday, so that would be yesterday. But the big difference is that Israel has been very pushy about getting vaccine, not relenting. The Prime Minister is very insistent that the country will have a normal Passover. That's going to be around March. The fact that there is also maybe an election going to be happening around March may have something to do with it. But they are very, very insistent on getting the vaccine and making sure that everyone is going to get one by March so the country can be totally vaccinated, totally safe by then. So the question then is, what can Canada learn? Israel has vaccinated over 3 million people already. There's a lot of data that we can mine. What can Canada learn? Well, the first thing we can learn is how and when to administer the shots. As we know, there are two different shots, so the first and then the second booster. It turns out that people are far less immune after the first one than many people thought, and so we are learning, and you see there's some articles coming out of Quebec, that we're learning that we cannot delay between the first and the second. That is very important to get people those second booster shots. Second, we should learn to be much more insistent about our vaccine delivery. We've got to be on the phone with the CEOs of various different companies, pushing that we should get our deliveries, get them on time, maybe even get them early. Something that is very important to ensure that we do have that adequate supply. Second, the logistical issue. Now, I understand, obviously, Canada is a very different country than Israel, just in terms of size, in terms of logistics, in terms of structure. But we have to put that infrastructure in place, as the Israelis have done early on. That may require some of that infrastructure to sort of be idle, even though it is there in place, even though they don't have vaccines. But the fact that we have an infrastructure in place will mean that when the vaccines arrive, we'll be able to administer them much easier and much faster. And then lastly, we need our leaders and we need people in this country to be much more insistent that getting back to normal is a high priority, if not the highest priority. Again, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has made that the highest priority, saying that Israel will have a normal Passover in March. There's going to be an election, so that's obviously part of his calculus, but they are very insistent on showing that commitment to a return to normal life. So I really hope that some of our political leaders will look at the Israeli example, take whatever good they can, and maybe ignore some of the bad or ignore some of the pitfalls that they have fallen into. but definitely something we can learn. I really hope that we will get our vaccines on time and get everyone vaccinated before the other side effects that are dragging on take their toll, and hopefully we can just get back to normal as soon as possible. So for True North, I am Sam Eskenasi. Thank you so much for watching this video.